So, you want to try the Undercover Brella for yourself. You've heard people call this Brella the worst weapon in the game, and yet you've seen some of the amazing plays that people across the internet have pulled off with it. How is this possible? There has to be a reason, and you've likely come to the same conclusion as Mars Blackman.
Money's gotta be the shoes. Shoes.
Gear abilities aren't the be-all and end-all when it comes to Splatoon, but they can make it much easier to use certain weapons and complement different playstyles. For example, watch how much run speed up Splatling players use. So what's the magic ability formula for Undercover Brella domination? The truth is that it's a tricky question because what abilities you choose will depend a lot on the kit you have available and your personal style of play. Still, with the Undercover Brella, my guiding philosophy is this: lean into the strengths of the weapon. Sure, there are some things this weapon doesn't do well, but there are also some things it does really well, and ideally, your gear will want to double down on the latter to maximize the weapon's potential. Before we begin, keep in mind that we're just talking about the vanilla Undercover Brella kit within Splatoon 3. I had slightly different Brella builds for each Undercover kit in Splatoon 2, and thus any new kits we get in Splatoon 3 may require different abilities as well. With that in mind, let's get started. Let's talk about the most critical gear abilities first, and the first of these is Quick Respawn. Remember those Brella strengths I was talking about earlier? Yeah, eliminating opponents isn't one of them. The Undercover Brella occupies an odd position in the game because it wants to be played as an aggressive slayer, but you won't actually slay that many people. Instead, it wants to be the Sam Hunt of Splatoon and just take your time, engage you, distract you, stall you, and generally keep you from doing what you were planning to do. Sure, it will take a splat if it can get one, but with its low per shot damage and mediocre fire rate, you're usually going to be on the losing end of a straight up duel, and your KD ratios will tilt heavily towards the denominator, especially in Anarchy battles. In Splatoon 3, Quick Respawn shortens your respawn time after you die, but only if you haven't splatted an opponent since your last respawn. For bloodthirsty slayers that give as much as they take, this isn't all that helpful, but for Undercover Brellas that struggle to confirm splats, it still comes into play a fair amount, and thus helps keep you in the fight and in the face of your adversaries. I would start with at least one main slot of QR, but you could make an argument for another sub on top of that. From a base respawn time of 7.5 seconds, one main drops this weight to 6.3, but one main and one sub cuts it to just under 6 seconds. One main, two subs cuts it further to 5.67 seconds, but at some point you'll need to balance it with your other abilities. Next, let's talk about run speed up. The first big strength of the Undercover Brella is mobility. As a lightweight weapon, it lets you quickly cover ground as both a kid or squid or octopus, helping you reach the key positions you'll want to hold and hopefully buying you time to prepare before your opponents show up. There are two abilities that assist you with movement speed, but run speed up is the more important one for the Undercover Brella for 3 reasons. Number 1, your shield, aka your primary mode of defense, is only deployed when your weapon is firing, which means that standing and firing is going to be your default position. Number 2, your goal of getting in your opponent's way and wasting their time means that you'll usually find yourself in contested territory where enemy ink will make swimming more difficult. Number 3, your shield can absorb damage, sure, but there's a nifty little secret to making it last longer. Don't let your opponents hit it in the first place. You may be standing and firing, but you're never actually standing still. You'll be strafing left and right, you'll be jumping, you'll be pressing forward or pulling back, and you'll generally be doing your best impression of Neo from the Matrix to keep your opponent from landing their shots. In the heat of battle, run speed up makes your Brella dance moves that much faster, which can be the difference between winning and losing a fight. I tend to like 3 sub-slots of run speed up over 1 main slot, because it gets you the same amount of movement while firing as a main slot, while only being 1 unit per frame below a main when not firing. And let's be honest, if you're standing, you're firing. This can free up your main slots for other useful abilities that we'll discuss later. You can stack a few more subs of run speed up on if you want. For example, 5 subs gives you the same firing mobility as a Sploosh-O-Matic, but just as with QR, you'll need to balance this with the rest of your abilities. Now, let's talk about two abilities that fall just short of the critical category, starting with Swim Speed Up. Proper positioning on the map can be crucial to getting the upper hand on your opponent, and Swim Speed Up will get you to that position in a hurry, whether it be the objective, a crucial piece of high ground, or a choke point close to your enemy's spawn. It's the sort of ability that any weapon can benefit from, and this Brella is no exception. I've been experimenting with one main slot right now, but you can adjust this based on how aggressive or passive you tend to play. If you want to play deep on your opponent's side of the field, you could try a little more. If you're mostly riding the tower or otherwise playing objective, you can trade some Swim Speed Up for extra Run Speed Up. Ink Recovery Up is another ability that isn't absolutely necessary, but one I've found to be very helpful in battle. The second strength of the Undercover Brella is efficiency. Each shot consumes 4% of your ink tank, so a full tank gives you 25 shots to work with. I found that this is more than enough to engage the enemy and even help pitch in with map control without worrying too much about the low fuel light coming on. Still, no one likes being stuck at the gas pump, and if your moments to rest in squid or octopus form are few and far between, you'll want to take advantage of any free moment you have to keep that tank full. I tend to run one main slot of Ink Recovery Up, which is admittedly more than a lot of other people. The numbers on Sendu.ink don't look that impressive, but it's a very noticeable difference in the field. The ink line just seems to rocket back up to the top of the tank, and I find I can paint over 1,000 points worth of turf while rarely running into ink management trouble. Now, let's discuss two main slot only abilities that provide both mobility and efficiency boosts in certain situations. First up is Comeback, which gives you a laundry list of benefits for 20 seconds after respawning. You get 10 ability points, or essentially an extra main slot's worth, of Ink Saver Main, Ink Saver Sub, Ink Recovery Up, Run Speed Up, Swim Speed Up, and Special Charge Up. This covers every useful ability except Quick Respawn, plus gives you a bunch of other stuff that's nice to have. What's not to like? Of course, with an ability like this, the question comes back to playstyle. If you're playing aggressively and getting splatted a lot, Comeback can be a real lifesaver, but if you find you're not dying all that much, it might be better to go with the individual abilities so that they're active at all times. Another option is Last Ditch Effort, an ability that activates either immediately during the last 30 seconds of a turf war, or gradually when an opponent pushes their counter from 50 to 30 in an Anarchy battle. At full power, you get 15 ability points worth of Ink Saver Main, Ink Saver Sub, and Ink Recovery Up. I would rank this one below Comeback because it doesn't offer any mobility perks, and if you're not married to lots of Ink Recovery Up like I am, none of the efficiency bonuses are all that helpful. It's worth thinking about, but you're probably better off just dedicating the main slot to Comeback or Quick Respawn directly. Next, I'd like to talk about what I call the 3 subs theory. There are 3 abilities that provide so much benefit with just a single sub slot that it's worth running them on darn near any weapon you use. These 3 abilities are Quick Super Jump, Sub Resistance Up, and Ink Resistance. Quick Super Jump cuts down on the amount of time that you're vulnerable while preparing to super jump and makes the jump slightly faster as well. Sub Resistance Up blocks just enough damage from sub-weapons that it can break many common damage combos that rely on them. Ink Resistance buys you a sliver of time before enemy ink slows you down and starts damaging you, while also reducing the passive damage that enemy ink can do. It's super helpful when you're working in contested areas, which is where the Brella is going to be most of the time. Generally, you'll want to stick to one sub-slot only of all 3, but it is worth experimenting with a bit more ink resistance to see if the added mobility complements your playstyle. Finally, let's talk about some abilities that are heavily playstyle dependent, and thus are only worth using in certain situations. Let's start with Splatoon 3's big new addition, Intensify Action. This ability relates to the new Squid Surge and Squid Roll abilities. It lowers the surge charge time, lets you keep your momentum during consecutive rolls, and reduces the jump accuracy penalty for both moves. Personally, I don't think this ability is terribly useful on the Undercover Brella. For one thing, the weapon has no jump RNG to speak of. For another thing, a Squid Surge makes more sense for weapons with faster kill times, but when your weapon is a slow 3-shot kill in the best of times, you'll be back on the ground long before you take out your opponent. As far as the Squid Roll, it can let you dodge shots and reduce the damage of those that hit you, but that's kind of what your shield is for. And unlike your shield, you can't attack while you're rolling, at least to start. I would only use this ability if you're a heavy squid roll user, and even then, I wouldn't invest any more than one sub-slot in it. Next up is Ninja Squid, which hides the little splashes that pop out of the ink when you're swimming, helping you sneak around the map without being detected. I don't like this on the Undercover Brella because a stealth approach doesn't fit the weapon well at all. You want your opponents to know where you are and have to deal with you, and sharking for quick kills doesn't work when your weapon kills as slowly as the Undercover does. Your opponent has plenty of time to react to your sudden appearance. Given that you'll be doing most of your work while standing, and the ability reduces your mobility by slowing down your swim speed, I would say you have better uses for that main slot. Only use this if you find you really need to get into certain positions on the map. Finally, we have Ink Saver Main, which leans into the Undercover Brella's efficiency but doesn't stack well enough to make much of a difference. One sub-slot of Ink Saver Main gets you about one extra shot per ink tank, and if you're careful with ink tank management, you can probably get better value from other abilities. If you're going to use Ink Saver Main, the ideal amount is one main and one sub-slot. One main by itself just barely misses giving you 4 extra shots on a full tank, while one main and one sub gives you 5 more shots per tank and 2 extra shots after using an ink mine. Now, every other ability, for one reason or another, is not worth running on the Undercover Brella. Most of these are pretty straightforward, but there is one surprise omission from my list, Stealth Jump, which hides your super jump landing spot from faraway players and is super meta for most every frontline weapon right now. You'll see a lot of people use this on the Undercover Brella, but just between you and me, it's a really bad idea. You see, the funny thing about the Undercover Brella is that you actually want people to see your super jump landing spot, especially cheeky anchor weapons that think they can get an easy splat. However, if you just hold ZR as you prepare for landing, you'll start shooting and deploy your shield, which means that if you know which direction the anchor is shooting from, you'll land, eat the shot with your shield, and back away to safety, successfully accomplishing your goal of wasting their time. Determining what direction to aim is generally pretty easy, especially against chargers with their super obvious laser. If a nearby weapon can camp your jump, they'll be able to see your landing spot anyway, and even then, you've still got a shield's worth of damage to use to make your getaway, although knowing what direction to aim your shield is a little harder. The only potential downside is that a faraway short-range weapon might notice your jump and be able to meet you at that spot, which to me isn't enough to justify wasting a main slot worth of ability points on Stealth Jump. So these are my recommendations for what gear you might want to use for the Undercover Brella. Hopefully this guide will give you some ideas on how to put together the best set for you. Thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you again in a future video. So long!